Hey everyone, so in this video we're going to make a simple old school arcade style top-down shooter. So you're going to have a tank that you move around the screen and that enemy tanks, waves of enemy tanks will appear, and then it's just you shooting them and them shooting at you, and then the game ends when you get destroyed. So again, like old school arcade games like Asteroids and Time Pilots, was just successive waves of enemies that you have to defeat. So as far as the playable and enemy units, I'm going to be using the low poly tanks package. It is on the Unity store by A3D. It is $10 USD. You do not have to use these for this to work. I want to impress that upon you. This code will work with any assets. You do not have to use these. This is just to give you something to look at. You can make this code work using cubes and orbs. Okay, so the first thing that I did is I created a plane and then I applied a material to it. This material is also available from A3D. It's a free package. And so I just applied the material to the plane. Now let's take our first tank and we'll just put this into the scene. And so far, it already comes with everything that it needs as far as it has a transform, it has the meshes, it even has a collider. We'll be using that in a bit. Actually, might as well switch that to trigger now. We're going to have everything be a trigger. Add component, we need to add some physics to this. It already has a collider, so we don't need to add that. And what we do need, though, we need a rigid body. We're not going to use gravity, and now this will allow us to apply velocity. So let's now add a script to this to allow you to control it. There's definitely more advanced scripts. Again, this is just meant to be a very simple character controller. So we're going to take our hero script and put it here, and then we will review this. As far as creating script, that's just right click, create, C#, and that creates a script. So let's go ahead and take a look at our hero script. And what you're going to see is 4 or 5 lines of code in that they're just kind of repeated over and over again. So at the beginning, we need some variables. So public transform cannonball. So obviously this will be the shot that you can fire. Public static vector 3 current position. We are going to constantly capture the position that your tank is at. You'll see why in a minute. And then private string wait to shoot. So this is so that you can't just rapid fire, that there's a delay in between shots. So this is going to check to see if you're currently shooting or not. In the update section, we're going to have current position is equal to transform.position. So like I said, we're going to be constantly updating this to know what position you're at. We need to know that in order to have the tanks face you and chase you. And now what I was saying about repeated line of codes, you're just going to check for input, and then you're going to do two things. You're going to rotate, or specifically you're going to have the object face a certain direction, and you're going to have it move in that direction. I've had a few tutorials already like this, so some of this will be, you've seen this before. So if input.get key A, so we're using typical WASD control, you could replace this with, analog stick if you wish. So get component transform Euler angles equals new vector 3. So -90, so that's going to be facing left. So these are all going to be 90-degree differences from each other. And if they are complete opposite directions, then obviously it'd be 180 degrees. And all these are being done on the y-axis because y is up. So you're rotating on that vertical axis. And then the second one, get component rigid body velocity. Now, I've also mentioned this previously. This says whatever direction you're moving, move in that direction. Transform.forward, and then you're just multiplying it by whatever arbitrary speed bonus you want to give it. So this is just saying move in whatever direction is forward. So if you can tightly control what direction your character is facing, then you could just say move forward, and that's what we're doing here. We're always saying what direction the player is facing. And really it's just rinse and repeat. So else input.get key and then D. So again, WSD control, and now it's just the same 2 lines. Adjusting Euler angle for positive 90 because A and D, as I said, are opposing directions, so you're going to have 180 degrees difference. And then again, get component rigid body velocity transform forward. So this is always the same. So There might be a way to make this code a little bit cleaner so that you don't have to keep repeating this. But again, since this is such a small program, it's not a big deal. I've had some applications recently where you really wanted to do the optimization quickly. In this case, it's not going to really be any more key controls than this. So you could optimize it, but it's not a big deal because there's only 4 directions. And then again, rinse and repeat, checking for W. That one will be facing up. And then checking for S. That one will be facing down. So again, you have a 180-degree difference between them. Now they're all connected by the else statement, so only one key at a time will be acknowledged. And then this says, let's see. Okay, so since they're all connected, this is saying that if none of these are true, so you're not pressing A, you're not pressing D, you're not pressing W, you're not pressing S. If you haven't done any of those, then transform.forward 0, in other words, stop moving. Just instantly stop. Now, as a separate if statement, we now check for the mouse button. So input.get mouse button down 0. So 0 is the left, 1 is the right, and 2 is if you press down on the scroll wheel. So not scroll the scroll wheel, but press down, because some mice, the scroll wheel is actually, you can press down on it like a third button. And, so double ampersand, wait to shoot equals no. So like I said, this is checking to make sure that you're not already shooting. We want there to be a delay. So wait to shoot is immediately changed to yes. Why? Because you just shot, so you don't want to be able to shoot again. So wait to shoot equals y equals yes. Instantiate. We've talked about this before. 3 arguments. What is instantiated, where it's instantiated, and the rotation what's being instantiated. We're going to instantiate that cannonball object that we saw at the top here. We just haven't actually linked it yet. So if you press the mouse button, the left mouse button, the cannonball will be instantiated. Where will it be instantiated? It will be instantiated at the position. So transform.position is the position of the object the script is attached to. So instantiate at the position of the tank, the hero tank. And we have to break it down to its x, y, z. So transform.position.x. Now here we can use a constant. Why do we use a constant here? Because everything is at the same level. We don't have helicopters, and we don't have uneven terrain, okay? So everything is on the ground. So we will know what height this will always be. So if you did have uneven terrain, then you couldn't use a constant. You would have to use a variable. So it'd be transform.position.y plus whatever change you wanted to do. This just happens to be the number. I obviously already was testing this before I started recording. This is the height to make it work out right. So what's being instantiated, where it's being instantiated, you're actually doing the x, y, and z, and then the rotation of the object that the script is attached to. Again, we're taking the rotation of the tank and applying it to the cannonball. Why? Because then we're going to be able to do something similar where we say, it's going to be a different script, but the cannonball will also say move forward. So we're using that rotation. So we're going to rotate when we instantiate the cannonball, we're going to have the rotation not of the cannonball, but the rotation of your tank. So it's facing the same direction as your tank. And then start coroutine shot reset. So this is shot reset here. So Ienumerator shot reset, and this is just a delay. So yield return new, wait 4 seconds, 0.5f. I'm not going to go through the details of yield return new. Just know that this entire thing is doing what that says. You're going to wait for a certain amount of time, measured in seconds. So we're going to wait half a second. This is completely and arbitrary. You can make whatever delay you want. This is just game balance. Okay, so shot reset, this gets executed. It waits half a second, and then this variable is reset back to no. Why? That way, if you press the button again, the left mouse button, this will be true again, because it was made false, because this is Y. So until this gets changed back, this would not execute again. And that is the script for the tank. And let's go to, so we put the rigid body there, so we need to put the cannonball. I have other tutorials about it, but there is a glow, there's an emissive material on this, and that there's a glow. I have other tutorials if you want to see how to do that, but in short, you need to add post-processing, and then you need to add a couple post-processing components to your camera to make it work, but that's really a separate tutorial. Okay, so if I haven't forgotten anything, this should now work. So WASD should move the tank, and then pressing the left mouse button, it should fire. And as you can see, it's old school as far as it automatically is facing that direction. It's not doing a rotation. I definitely could do that if I wanted to, but again, this is meant to be just a simple arcade style game. So if I left click, there we go. And no matter how fast I click, that's the speed you get. So as I said, there's a missing material. You also see there's a light attached to it. I'm not going to get into that. That's really, you don't have to attach a light to the object if you want. That's just there for visual effects. I'm actually not even certain if I really like the light there. I think it's a bit distracting. But we all like to show off. Anyways, so we now have a tank that is controllable. Now what we need a routine that spawns the enemy tanks. So we're going to go to game object, create empty, GM. Sorry, I had caps lock on. And this is, as the name would suggest, going to be used as a game master. I've said before, calling it GM means absolutely nothing to Unity. It only means something to you, the developer. So you know that's what you're using it for. So we're going to put our game flow script on it. Again, I already showed you how to create a script. And let's take a look at game flow. So game flow is going to allow you to instantiate the tanks. And this is going to look very familiar, at least some of it's going to look familiar if you watched the recent video that I did concerning turn-based RPGs as far as using an array to control the enemies. So public game object tank. So this is an array. So public, this makes it accessible in the inspector. That's important, so we can just drag and drop. Game object, this is the type of object it's going to be. It's going to be a game object. Because if you recall here, we mentioned that you could do like a vector3, you could do a string. Well, this one is a game object, and then the name of the variable. It's a tank. Private int, which tank this is going to be used to randomly decide which tank is going to spawn. And then in the start section, we say start coroutine spawn timer. So again, we're going to use Ienumerator. So Ienumerator spawn timer, you're going to see the same code repeated a couple times. So this says wait 2 seconds. And then we're going to take that variable that we just declared up here and we say equals random range 0 to 6. Because we have 5 different tanks, I believe, because this number, the upper number for ints are excluded. So this is included, this is excluded. And then just instantiate the tank. Now in this case, I don't have to use the other variable, the other arguments, because if you're the object that you're instantiating, if you're going to use its position and its rotation, then you don't have to declare that. It's presumed. And so what I've done is I've already predetermined where each tank will spawn. If you want to be really fancy, you could do a couple more randomized statements to determine where it would randomly spawn, but I didn't want to get that fancy. Again, we're trying to keep it old school arcade game. And then it's just rinse and repeat, because spawning one tank at a time isn't enough, so we'll spawn 2. And again, so you generate another random number and instantiate another tank. Only problem with this is you technically could spawn 2 of the same tank and they would spawn in the same place. So you might want to put an additional control here. As far as like if the same number comes up a second time, then re-roll, that kind of thing. So you would just do that with an if statement. So that's the only weakness to this, is that you could have 2 tanks appear in the same place. And then start coroutine spawn time. In other words, do it over again. So this becomes recursive. It's going to just keep repeating itself over and over and over again. So in perpetuity. All right, so what we do now, we now have to go to that GM object. And so here we have the tank object that we just created. And we said, actually, it looks like there are 6. I'm not sure why they did 5, but that's all right. We'll do 6. And then you enter, and there are your 6 tanks. So you just drag and drop. And for this particular application, it doesn't matter which one is used. Okay. And like I said, I preset the X and the Z position. So it's just going to spawn at those positions. So I already mentioned the weakness with that, and we'll move on. Okay, so that should spawn the tanks. The tanks do not have any script attached to them, so they won't do anything. So let's just have that work, though. We'll just run that so you can see that it really is spawning. And we'll just go to scene. And you can see that the tanks are indeed spawning. And they're going to keep appearing in the same fixed positions. Okay, so we have a tank that we can control and shoot. We have tanks that are spawning. We now need them to chase after you. So how do we do this? So let's select all the tanks, and we're going to add a couple components to these. We are going to add, let's just add box collider. So they don't seem to have colliders on them, even though, actually, let's double check that. Yeah, for whatever reason, they don't have colliders on them, at least not at the top level, so we'll just add a new collider. So we'll just do a box collider, and we'll make them triggers. And what we'll do now, we now need to give them a rigid body so we can apply velocity to them. So physics, rigid body, again, we'll get rid of gravity. And now we just take our enemy script, and we'll review this. And we'll drag and drop that there. So they also have a shot. I already explained that, so we'll just drop theirs now. And for the enemy script. So here's that transform that we're just looking at. So that's the shot they're going to instantiate. And then update transform dot look at. So this is essential. This is what makes them chase you. Transform.lookAt does exactly what you think it does. It tells this object to look at another object. So again, we're dealing with that concept of the forward side, the forward-facing direction of an object. But this time we're using the lookAt command. And then here is that variable that we talked about earlier. So look at that position. So you can either use an object here, or you can use an actual vector 3 here, or vector 2 if you're in a 2D environment. Get component, rigid body, velocity transform forward times 1.7. So again, that idea of whatever direction you're facing in, move in that direction. And then we're making them move at a slower speed because they actually have an unfair advantage because they can move in a diagonal direction, and currently you can't. That'd be one of the benefits if you switch to like an analog controller, an analog stick, you'd be able to have that type of diagonal control. It'd be a little bit more complex if we did it using the keyboard. So to offset the fact that they can move diagonal, we're going to have them move slower. So keep that in mind that you don't necessarily, you might think, oh, I want them to move at the same speed. Well, if they're more versatile or more agile, then no, you might actually want them to move at a slower speed. And then let's see, so Ienumerator delay shot. So again, we just as you have a delay to keep you from rapid firing, we want them to have a delay so they don't rapid fire. And the only thing that is missing is this is not actually being executed at the moment. So coroutines such as Ienumerator will never, ever, ever run themselves. You have to specifically call them out. So let's do that. So in the start section, when the object is first instantiated, start this. And so waits 4 seconds, instantiates the shot, and then the coroutine says, okay, do it again. And now you're in an infinite loop because this keeps referring back to that. This I do need to change though because I said transform.position, and it's the same thing um, since the cannon itself is a little bit above the ground. We need to break this down into its 3 vectors. So transform.position.x is fine, and then we said something like 1.57. And again, you can only do that because you're on flat terrain. The vertical never changes. And then transform dot position dot z. So as messy as it looks, that is simply one argument. It's the 3 coordinates. And again, we're using the rotation of the tank, not the rotation of the shot. Okay, so that will make them shoot. And now the shot itself needs to do something. So we already have a script that makes this shot move forward, so we should be able to use the same script. I already dragged and dropped it on it. I must have done that off before I was recording. But if we look at that script, the shot con simply says, and you do this in the start section. So get component rigid body velocity, that should look really familiar now. Transform.forward, again, that should look really familiar, but we're making it move much faster. And then destroy game object after 5 seconds. So when you're using destroy and then game object, if you give just one argument, you're saying what gets destroyed. If you add a comma, you're then saying how long to wait, because we don't want these shots to go out infinitely. Now, the only thing that doesn't happen are collisions. So let's just test this, and then we'll finish up with the collisions. As you can see, they are facing me. They are shooting at me. All right, something is still solid because I saw it bounce. So more than likely, I would want to make my tank a little bit faster, but you can see otherwise, it's a success that they absolutely do face you. And that's another reason why you'd want him to actually have smoother rotation, is because they have smoother rotation. Great. All right, so now we need collision. So we have a script on the enemy and we have a script on the hero. You can do this one of 2 ways. You could create a separate script for collisions, but there are pitfalls to that. So it saves coding and you can just drag and drop the script. And so if you have to make a change to the collision, it would change to all the objects. But this is a very simple application, so we'll just put this right in here. So on trigger, see, sometimes this happens where for some reason it doesn't want to recognize on trigger enter depending on where I'm placing it. The sequence of this, to the best of my knowledge, should not matter. That this would function up here, but for some reason it's not, the editor isn't recognizing it. So on trigger enter collider other. So again, we made things triggers. I think the problem is that one of the shots was not a trigger because I thought I saw one bounce around. So we're simply going to say if other dot tag is equal to, sorry, I brushed over that. So whenever you have an object, you can apply a tag to it. So what I did is I added tag and then I just created shot and shot too. So we only want this to be affected by the player shots. We don't want you to be destroyed by enemy, by friendly fire. So we're only looking for the tag shot. And then for now, we'll just do destroy. And like I said, you can either do a timer. In this case, we don't want there to be a timer. We want it to happen immediately. Now, this is also where you would instantiate like a particle system. Like if you want there to be an explosion or a fire system, you would do it right here. I'm not going to do it right now because I don't have one. But again, you would do instantiate. You would say what you instantiate, which would be the particle system. Where is it going to be instantiated? Transform.position, because you want it to be at the position of the tank. And then you would use the rotation of the particle system itself. All right, so now we just copy and paste this, and we're going to have to make one change. And we go to the hero. And for the hero, see how it's above Ienumerator and yet it's just fine, so I don't know if that's a glitch with the editor or what. And in this case, we're saying if the hero is colliding with shot 2. And then if this works, that's about it for the video, as long as I didn't make any mistakes. Let's see. Oh, let's just run it. If I made a mistake, it'll be a teachable moment. Okay, it went through him. So we do have an issue. I'm going to just quickly pause. Okay, the good news is that I made a very simple mistake. So remember when I clicked on the tanks and I added the box collider and I just presumed it was the right size? It was not. It did not size properly. So if you click into the tank, see how that collider is like completely wrong? So we just need to edit the collider so it's like more appropriate. And you can use collision, the collider boxes, to help with difficulty. Like you can like extend slightly beyond the border, give the player the benefit of the doubt kind of thing. Or you can be incredibly controlling that it has to be a precise hit. That's usually why you use the mesh collider, because the mesh collider, if working correctly, perfectly fits the shape, the mesh, hence the name. And so the cannon sticks out, but that's okay. It will hit eventually anyways. It'll just make a difference of like a millisecond. All right, so that's close enough for this one, and then we just have to rinse and repeat. I'd even thought of that too when I added the box colliders, but this is like my 5th time trying to do this video. I tried doing it last night, and it just was not happening. Okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pause and I'll do the last one so I'm not wasting anyone's time. So I'll be right back. Now that you've seen 2, you know what to do for the rest. Okay, so I fixed all the colliders. And let's see if it's working now. So his collider probably is wrong too. There we go. And we'd want the shot to get destroyed too, unless it's a piercing shot. Yeah, so his shots are going through me. So let's just, I do see this error message about the mesh collider, so that's probably referring to him. So mesh collider, convex trigger. So now he's the trigger, so now it should work on him. And then we'll be done. So I hope that this was useful. I hope that you found this helpful. And if there's additional features you want to see, actually, I went through him. All right, hang on just a second. Okay, that should do it. I just got rid of the mesh collider, so he has a box collider as well. Just let someone shoot at him. There we go. So you have a very simple arcade game now. You would have to add a few things like score and progression, because right now you'd get overwhelmed really quickly. Like I said, there's also the issue of the tanks overlapping on exactly the same location when because each tank has a unique location that it instantiates on, so you'd probably eventually want to get rid of that and instead either have the coordinates be randomized as well, or you would just put in coding so as that you can't instantiate the same tank twice. That way you don't have it put onto exactly the same position twice. So that should about do it. I hope you found this useful, and please enjoy the rest of the day. And as I mentioned, if you want to see more of this, leave a comment and say what you'd like to see. But again, that's like 90% of the game. You'd add scoring, so you'd add a UI, you would add particle systems, and that's about it. Okay, so please enjoy the rest of your day.